Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're so glad you're here with us today. Feeling grateful can actually boost learning. So a big thanks for choosing to spend some time with us as we delve into the world of tetracyclines and glycylcyclines,
That's right.
those powerful medications we use to fight bacterial infections.
Exactly. They're essential weapons in our fight against infections, and understanding how they work can be incredibly empowering.
So let's imagine a scenario. You're out hiking, maybe enjoying nature. You get a tick bite, and unfortunately you end up developing Lyme disease. What antibiotic is your doctor likely to prescribe?
Most likely doxycycline. It's very effective against the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. What's fascinating is that doxycycline is a descendant of some of the earliest tetracyclines discovered. Chlortetracycline was discovered in 1948, and then oxytetracycline followed in 1950.
Wow, so those early discoveries really opened the door for a whole family of antibiotics, didn't they?
Absolutely. As scientists continued to research and modify those original structures, they created semi-synthetic versions like doxycycline and mitocycline. Then, even newer ones like ticycline and omadacycline joined the family.
I'm already noticing a pattern here. A
Mhm.
family of antibiotics, all with similar roots. So what makes these bug busters unique? Is it their family resemblance?
You got it. They all share a core structure, a four-ring arrangement of atoms. You can almost picture it like a fancy square. Think of it as their family crest.
Okay, I can visualize that.
But just like in any family, there are subtle differences among these antibiotics.
So are those differences what make each antibiotic good at fighting specific types of bacteria?
Precisely. They all have a broad spectrum of activity against various bacteria, but subtle tweaks to their structure can make one better than another for a specific infection. For example, doxycycline is also a key player in treating syphilis, especially for people allergic to penicillin.
Wow, that's really versatile. But how do these antibiotics actually work? Do they just storm in like a SWAT team?
Not quite. Think of them more like secret agents. Tetracyclines are masters of disguise. They sneak into the bacteria and sabotage their protein-making machinery. Imagine a bustling kitchen where ingredients are being assembled into delicious dishes. That's kind of what a ribosome is like for a bacterium.
So the ribosome is the kitchen and the ingredients are.
Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Tetracyclines slip into this kitchen, bind to a specific spot on the ribosome, and prevent those amino acids from being assembled into proteins. No proteins, no essential functions, and the bacteria can't survive.
That's incredibly sneaky and effective. So, time for a little pop quiz. Are you ready?
Right it on.
Okay, here it is. Which of these best describes how tetracyclines work? A, they blow up the bacteria's outer wall. B, they scramble the bacteria's DNA recipe book. C, they cut off the bacteria's energy supply. Or D, they jam the bacteria's protein-making machinery. Take a moment to think about it. All right, the answer is D, they jam the bacteria's protein-making machinery, just like we were discussing.
And remember that kitchen analogy we talked about?
Yes, I do.
Well, tetracyclines are like those pesky little gnats that get in the way and disrupt the whole cooking process.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know how they work, but how do they travel through the body? Like, what's
Yeah.
their journey?
That's their pharmacokinetic passport. Let's take doxycycline as our example. One of the reasons it's so popular is because it's almost fully absorbed when taken orally. Plus, it's a good option even for people with kidney problems because it's mainly eliminated through, you guessed it, poop.
So that's why it's considered safe for kidneys. It takes a different exit route from the body.
Precisely. Now, tetracycline itself is a bit different. Its absorption can be affected by what you eat, and it relies more on the kidneys for elimination, meaning dosage adjustments might be needed for people with kidney issues. It can also potentially be a bit hard on the liver.
Okay, got it. Doxycycline, easy absorption, safe for kidneys. Tetracycline, a bit more complex. So how can we remember all of this?
Here's a mnemonic or memory trick for you. Do tall men take tea? That's doxycycline, tetracycline, monocycline, tigecycline. It helps you remember the order they were discovered and some of their key differences.
Oh, I love a good mnemonic. But let's face it, no medication is perfect. What about side effects? Are there any we should be aware of?
You're right. While generally well tolerated, tetracyclines can cause some tummy troubles like nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. With doxycycline, it's crucial to drink plenty of water because it can irritate the esophagus, that tube connecting your mouth to your stomach. Imagine trying to swallow a dry cracker without any water. Not fun.
Ouch, that's not a pleasant thought. I've also heard that some of these antibiotics can make you more sensitive to the sun. Is that right?
Absolutely. Photosensitivity is a common side effect, meaning your skin can burn more easily when exposed to the sun. So, if you're taking one of these antibiotics and planning to be outdoors, don't forget the sunscreen and a good pair of sunglasses.
That's a good reminder, especially during those sunny summer months. And what about those warnings you sometimes hear about teeth staining, especially in kids? Is that something to worry about?
That's another important consideration. Tetracyclines can bind to calcium in developing teeth and cause staining, which unfortunately can be permanent. So they're generally avoided in children under 8 years old. They can also temporarily affect bone growth in kids, but thankfully this is reversible once they start taking the medication.
Okay, so here comes pop quiz round two. Which of these side effects is not typically associated with tetracyclines? A, tummy troubles. B, sun sensitivity. C, hair loss. Or D, tooth discoloration in kids. All right, think carefully about it. The answer is C, hair loss. We talked about stomach issues, sun sensitivity, and the effects on teeth, especially in children. Hair loss isn't usually on the list of side effects.
And it's also worth mentioning that these antibiotics are generally avoided during pregnancy due to potential risks to the developing baby. Always consult with a doctor if you have any concerns or questions about these medications.
Absolutely. So we've covered how these antibiotics work, their journey through the body, and even some potential side effects. But what about those food fights you sometimes hear about with tetracyclines, like how dairy products can interfere with their effectiveness?
You're talking about drug interactions. Certain foods and medications can definitely affect how well tetracyclines are absorbed. Dairy products, antacids, and iron supplements are some of the biggest culprits. Think of them as little bullies trying to block the antibiotic from getting where it needs to go.
So it's like a battle for absorption in the digestive system.
Exactly. Timing is key here. For tetracycline itself, it's best to take it on an empty stomach. Doxycycline and minocycline are a bit less affected by food, but it's still a good idea to avoid those calcium-rich bullies.
Got it. So we've covered the basics of those older tetracyclines, but I'm curious about the newer members of the family, like tigecycline, the one that's supposed to be a resistance buster. What makes it so special?
Well, bacteria are pretty clever, and they've figured out ways to resist those older tetracyclines. Tigecycline, however, has a secret weapon. It's almost like it wears a disguise that allows it to bypass those bacterial defenses and get to work. It's effective against a broad range of bacteria, including some that are resistant to other types of antibiotics.
It sounds like a superhero with a special power. But every superhero has a weakness, right?
You're right. While tigecycline is a powerful tool, it's not a magic bullet. It's not very effective against certain bacteria like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and its activity against a few others is a bit weaker. It's crucial to remember that no antibiotic is universally effective against all bacteria.
That makes sense. And what about side effects? Are there any unique ones associated with tigecycline?
The most common are nausea and vomiting, and they seem to be more pronounced with higher doses. There can also be temporary increases in liver enzymes, but these usually resolve on their own. However, there's a more serious concern with tigecycline that we need to address. The FDA has issued a warning about an increased risk of death from any cause in patients treated with tigecycline compared to other antibiotics.
Wow, that's a serious consideration. Oh, yeah. It sounds like a powerful tool, but one that needs to be used very carefully and thoughtfully.
Exactly. The exact reason for this increased risk isn't fully understood, but it emphasizes the importance of reserving tigecycline for situations where it's absolutely necessary and when other options aren't suitable.
Got it. Powerful, but used with caution. Now, are there any other new members of the tetracycline family we should be aware of?
Absolutely. There's omadacycline and eravacycline, both approved for specific infections and with their own unique profiles of activity and side effects.
This tetracycline family is quite diverse. It seems like there's a lot to consider when choosing the right antibiotic for a particular infection.
You're absolutely right. But before we delve into those other family members, let's address the elephant in the room, antibiotic resistance. It's a growing problem and a major threat to public health. Bacteria are incredibly adaptable and have developed various ways to resist the effects of these antibiotics.
So how do they do it? Do they have tiny little shields and swords?
Not quite, but their defense mechanisms are quite impressive. They can develop pumps to kick the antibiotic out of their cells, create proteins that protect their ribosomes from being blocked, or even produce enzymes that break down the antibiotic itself.
Wow, they're like tiny escape artists, always finding ways to outsmart us.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to use antibiotics responsibly, only when they're truly needed, and always complete the full course of treatment as prescribed by your doctor. Not doing so can actually help those resistant bacteria thrive.
That makes perfect sense. We need to be mindful of how we use these powerful medications. This has been an incredibly insightful journey so far, and I feel like I've already learned so much about the tetracycline family, their history, their mechanisms of action, their strengths and weaknesses, and the challenges we face in preserving their effectiveness against resistant bacteria.
I agree. It's been a pleasure sharing this knowledge with you. Now let's shift gears and explore those newer additions to the family in more detail. They really are remarkable, aren't they?
They are. And speaking of those new additions to the family, I'm really curious to learn more about omadacycline and arivacycline. How do they stack up against their older relatives?
Well, omadacycline, which was approved in 2018, is making a name for itself in treating community-acquired bacterial pneumonia and skin infections. One of its advantages is that it comes in both IV and oral formulations, which offers flexibility for patients.
Oh, so it's like having two tools in one. That's pretty convenient. What about arivacycline? What's its specialty?
Arivacycline, also approved in 2018, is specifically designed for complicated intra-abdominal infections. It's given intravenously and has shown good activity against a wide range of bacteria, including some that are resistant to other antibiotics.
That's really impressive, especially considering the growing concern about antibiotic resistance. But I imagine every medication has its downsides. Are there any notable side effects with these newer antibiotics?
You're right. Like most medications, they do come with some potential side effects. Omadacycline can cause elevated liver enzymes, high blood pressure, insomnia, and some stomach upset. Arivacycline, on the other hand, has been associated with reactions related to the infusion, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, low blood pressure, and even delayed wound healing.
Wow, those sound a bit more serious than some of the side effects we discussed earlier.
It's important to remember that not everyone experiences these side effects, and any potential risks need to be weighed against the benefits of the medication. It's always a balancing act, and careful monitoring by a doctor is crucial.
That makes sense. Speaking of careful monitoring, maybe this is a good time to recap some key points for anyone who might be prescribed tetracyclines or glycylcyclines.
Absolutely. Patient education is so important for the safe and effective use of these medications. First and foremost, we need to emphasize taking these antibiotics exactly as prescribed, even if they start feeling better before finishing the full course.
Right, no antibiotic shortcuts. What else should people be aware of?
We've already talked about photosensitivity, so reminding patients to protect themselves from the sun is crucial. We also need to highlight the importance of proper administration. Tetracycline should be taken on an empty stomach, while doxycycline and minocycline can be taken with or without food. However, regardless of the type of tetracycline, drinking plenty of water is essential, especially with doxycycline, to prevent esophageal irritation.
Good reminders. And what about those drug interactions we discussed earlier? Those can be tricky.
Ah, yes, those pesky interactions. We already talked about the impact of dairy products, antacids, and iron supplements on tetracycline absorption. But there are other potential culprits as well, including certain anti-seizure medications, blood thinners, and even oral contraceptives.
Wow, it sounds like there are a lot of potential interactions to be aware of. It seems like consulting a doctor or a pharmacist is essential for navigating those safely.
Absolutely. It's always best to err on the side of caution and seek professional guidance when it comes to medication interactions. And speaking of guidance, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Maybe it would be helpful to recap some key takeaways for our listeners.
Yes, a good recap always helps solidify the information.
Okay, here are the key takeaways. Tetracyclines and Glycylcyclines are a family of antibiotics that work by inhibiting bacterial protein synthesis. They're effective against a wide range of bacteria, but resistance is a growing concern, highlighting the importance of responsible antibiotic use. These antibiotics can cause various side effects, including gastrointestinal upset, photosensitivity, tooth discoloration in children, and potential drug interactions. Careful monitoring and patient education are essential to ensure safe and effective use.
Those are all excellent points. I feel like we've really equipped our listeners with a solid understanding of these important bug busters.
I agree. Now, to wrap things up, I'd like to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. As we continue to develop new antibiotics to combat resistant bacteria, it's crucial to consider the potential long-term consequences. Will we be able to stay ahead of the evolutionary curve, or will we reach a point where our current arsenal of antibiotics is no longer effective?
That's a really profound question. It really underscores the importance of ongoing research and development efforts, as well as responsible stewardship of our existing antibiotics.
Indeed. It's a complex issue with far-reaching implications and one that deserves our continued attention and exploration.
Well said. And on that note, we want to thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tetracyclines and glycylcyclines. We hope you found it informative and engaging. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with others who might also benefit from this knowledge. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
That's a question that keeps many scientists up at night.
It really does make you think about the long game, doesn't it?
It does. And as we've seen throughout this deep dive, tetracyclines have been a key player in that game for many years now.
Absolutely. From those early discoveries to the newer, more targeted antibiotics, the tetracycline family has proven to be incredibly valuable in fighting infections.
And along the way, we've gained a lot of knowledge about how they work, their strengths and limitations, and the ongoing challenge of antibiotic resistance.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, from their unique structures to their clever way of targeting bacterial ribosomes, their journey through the body, and even those sometimes peculiar side effects and potential drug interactions.
It's been quite a journey through the world of these bug busters, wouldn't you say?
It really has. And hopefully our listeners now feel more knowledgeable about these important medications.
I hope so too. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. Imagine a future where we can not only predict, but also prevent antibiotic resistance. What role might cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, gene editing, or even personalized medicine play in making that vision a reality?
That's a really thought-provoking question. It's both exciting and a little bit daunting to think about all the possibilities and the challenges that come with them.
It is. But one thing is for certain, the search for effective and sustainable solutions to combat bacterial infections is a journey that demands our continued curiosity, collaboration, and innovation.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, a huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tetracyclines and glycylcyclines. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little bit fun. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with others who might find it helpful. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, knowledge is power.